Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Tools and Tips for Caregivers. It's lovely to sort of see you all. I see a few folks and others who don't have their video on. Feel free to show yourselves, but we do ask that you mute. The program is being, hello, Janine Ferrari, I see you. My name is Laura Rossi. I'm the Executive Director of the Westchester Community Foundation, which is a philanthropic organization serving the residents of Westchester County. And one of the activities of the Community Foundation as a convener and a resource to folks is to provide public presentations on topics that matter, and in particular to provide qualified and reliable guidance on issues that affect many of us. And that is how we come to present Tools and Tips for Caregivers this evening. Do remain muted. Please know this is being recorded. We know there are folks who couldn't attend this evening, probably because they're caregiving or something came up. So we're going to be making this recording available on our website in the future. So thank you. And there will be presentations from both Michael Picon and Maura Laidlaw, our wonderful presenters, quite knowledgeable and terrific communicators. And then there will be time for questions and answers. So by design, it's 7 o'clock. I don't know if you're having wine or coffee or something in between. It's designed to be informative, informal, interactive. This is your time for you. So we will get started, and we're going to start with questions for Michael Picon, who is an author, let's say, with over 30 years of experience as a designer, an art director in magazines and books. And Michael, would you like me to show the two covers of the books now? Okay.
Sure,
so
please.
I'm going to screen share. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the covers of the two books that Michael has created. And so, Michael, I'm going to start the program by asking you to please define what a caregiver is, or who a caregiver is, and what caregiving is. What are we talking about this evening?
Sure. Thank you, Laura. So caregivers are all of us. Caregivers are the people that step up when your friends, they're the friends and the family who come to help out when a loved one, is ill or has entered long-term care. And that can be medical help, it can be emotional help, even physical help, just moving a person around. And we'll touch on this later, but it can also be helping someone with their finances, helping them pay rent, or helping them move into a long-term care facility. So it's just the friends and family that step up.
So tell us about the Caregiver's Notebook. Why did you develop this notebook?
So I became a caregiver in 2018. A very good friend of mine, my very first friend in New York, actually, he'd been in ill health for a number of years himself, when all of a sudden his partner, his husband, died in 2018 of a heart attack. So my friend was living alone. He was widowed and not in great health. And it was just one of those nightmare situations that you just think about this. All of a sudden he's living alone and he fell in the shower. He was on the floor in his shower for over 2 days without medication, without water. And when the police called, we called the police for a wellness check because I was out of town, and they found him on the floor. He was convulsing from lack of hydration and from all the medications that he's missed. So we rushed up to the hospital, and there were friends and family there who had heard about the situation. And everyone is, the family was good with visiting, and we wound up having to move him out of his apartment and do a lot of physical work later. But none of us in that room really knew everything that had to happen for him, like getting advance directives, getting healthcare proxies, taking care of his apartment that he was forced to leave. There was just all this work, and I stepped up. my friend Dick did not have a lot of family in New York City. Most of his family was in New Hampshire. But he did have one other friend that he'd grown up with, a high school friend, and the two of us stepped up and signed the paperwork that we were asked to, that was presented to us. And so one of the reasons that I created this book is because of all of a sudden I realized I'd signed all this paperwork without really understanding what my responsibilities were. What are my rights? What power do I have over this person's life? Am I his boss? Am I his guardian? What am I supposed to do? And really, all of the whole system, hospitals and healthcare workers and social workers, patient advocates, they're all trained to ask you these questions. Have you signed paperwork? Do you have advanced directives? Do you understand what a power of attorney is? And in that really critical moment, all you want to do is sign the paperwork. And so one of the main reasons I created this book is because I wound up giving the same information to people over and over and over again. I was being asked questions about my friend's allergies. What medications does he take? Does he have any heart issues in his family? All these kind of questions. And I was carrying around a giant messy briefcase, and inevitably you're going to be missing that one piece of paper that you need. So the books the books have two purposes. The Caregivers Notebook is really it's like a fill in the blanks notebook that you're just going to write down all the information, because people are going to ask you the same questions over and over again. And you need to have this information at your fingertips. You might be in the Social Security office in downtown Manhattan. You might be interviewing at a nursing facility and answering a lot of questions, or you might be on the phone with someone from the IRS. And so you need to have all of this information handy. So it's really about being organized, being informed, and being prepared to answer those questions. It's just a notebook. You could have this on a pad, on a legal pad, or many messy legal pads like I did, or it can be partially on your phone. The reason I put it into this format is because I'm a list maker. I like to keep things organized and tidy. But I also found that one day I needed some information when I was in the Social Security office, and they didn't have Wi-Fi, and my phone was running out of battery. And so that was just more stress for the situation. So they're intended to be write-in notebooks. That is the Caregiver's Notebook. It really is just a place to carry information around. The Power of Attorney book has a sort of a different, it has a different goal. There's about 5,000 words at the beginning that really explain what Power of Attorney is. And it answers a lot of the questions that people have, the most common misconceptions that people have. And also helps you build your own power of attorney. Lets you know, gives you advice on when it's more appropriate to hire a lawyer, and tells you about all the other extra paperwork that you need to have as part of your power of attorney kit, because it's not just one form. You're going to need a lot of different forms, and I lay out just kind of a real map of all the different things that you will need in this process.
Thank you. I'm in a stop share. I just want to make sure there's no one hanging out in the waiting room. Good. Thank you, Michael. So the unleashing power of attorney is not a power of attorney form, right? It is a book designed to help you understand some of these legal documents that might be needed. And we're going to have Mara talk through some of this as well, right?
Yeah, the introduction of the book is really, it's 5,000 words is like a long magazine article. I tried to keep it very short and in layman's terms. It's really just stories, that I collected from my own experiences and from people that friends and family that have gone through this. It really, like I said, it answers a lot of the most common misconceptions. I show you some sample forms. I use the New York State statutory short form. And then toward the end, there is a fill in the blank section that's like the Caregiver's Notebook. So it's another place where you can capture some of those details and that information.
Thank you. And I've dropped the link to your author page in the chat, so folks can check that out. The story about the phone, no Wi-Fi and the phone running out of battery is like my kid's nightmare, but I think it's sort of my nightmare too, but that's sort of speaks to the issue of things in writing, right? What are these not substitutes for? Like, for instance, dealing with a nursing home or dealing with a doctor, are there other things folks need to think about? I just want to be clear about sort of, one, it's a catch-all for information, but what is it not?
Well, it's not the actual healthcare proxy form. They're not the actual legal forms that is the power of attorney. These are, I call them support materials that you need for this. In my experience, and I think Maura mentioned this also, I've never had the experience of anyone in the hospital ever ask, can I see your healthcare proxy form? Maybe I've just been lucky, but generally once you're in the system, they recognize you, you're going to be in and out of the hospital, or in and out of the nursing home or the facility, and they get to know you. So that form isn't something that you would normally carry around. But many times, even after I've been there, I've been helping my friend Dick for over 5 years now, and someone will ask me, is he allergic to this? I have to go roughly through my papers. Does he have any history of passing out? Those kinds of questions.
Mhm.
And sometimes people will just want to know, when did this happen to him? And we're all busy people. It's hard to remember everything. I find for myself, I remember things better when I write them down.
Yes.
But to answer your question, these are not, you don't want to carry around all these papers with you. I say, a lot of there's a lot of advice out there about where you keep this paperwork, the actual paperwork, the death certificate, the birth certificate. You keep them in a safe, dry place at home, in a safe or in a locked cabinet. But you need that information with you in a notebook.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Thank you. And I mean, it's an inherently stressful situation, and these are practical tools that can hopefully help you manage the stress. I don't know that we're going to promise that it'll alleviate all the stress, but it sort of helps with navigating and managing the stress.
Yeah, because it's overwhelming when you start to learn all the different things that you have to know. It can really weigh you down. You don't need that extra stress. You're taking care of your friend, your mom, your family member, your partner. You want to be there present for them. You want to have all this information and be secure in that knowledge, be confident and compassionate.
Yeah, that's wonderfully helpful. And I encourage folks to check out the link in the chat. And we're going to move to Maura now. Maura is a co-managing partner in her law firm, and I will have her introduce herself and what she does. And then our first question for you, Maura, is very basic. What are the legal issues that caregivers need to be aware of?
Thanks, Laura, for this opportunity to talk and for designing the program, really. So my name is Maura Laidlaw. I'm an attorney. I practice primarily in Westchester County and surrounding areas. And I told Laura I was happy to introduce myself because there are a few things about my background that I think are helpful to keep an eye out for if you're ever looking for legal counsel. Uh, I, so I serve on a state bar association committee. It's the elder law and special needs section of our New York State Bar Association. We do a tremendous amount of advocacy in Albany in terms of funding for state and government programs. And then we also serve as resources to each other. It's an incredible community that I feel privileged to belong to. I also do work within Westchester County. I'm a former chair of the Guardianship Committee and of the Trust and Estates Committee for our county bar. I'm one of the current co-chairs on the Women's Bar Association's Elder Law section there. And the last, sort of credential I have is I'm a certified elder law attorney, and that's an accredited program by the American Bar Association. Required me to take one of my first written tests since passing the bar exam, and so that in and of itself was its own, funny throwback situation to be taking a one-day proctored exam. But I mention all that because this is a very technical area. And by the time people are, caregivers in particular, are helping a loved one navigate and are helping locate an attorney, that can be its own overwhelming moment. And looking for someone who lives and breathes this area becomes really important. And the one constant in my practice area is change. Is part of why I do stay so involved in our state bar association, is we have to stay constantly up to date on changes in the law. And so it's not enough to be able to rely on what Michael's experience was with that power of attorney in 2018, because now we have a totally different form, so it's something that changes moment by moment, and you need a lawyer that lives and breathes it so that they are up to speed. And so in terms of legal issues to be aware of in this moment as you step in to help a loved one, very important to get the advanced directives locked down right away. And let's just define advanced directives, and probably jumping ahead a little bit, but I don't think I can use that term without defining it. So advanced directives are documents that you use and need and give authority while you are still alive, is the best term for the types of advanced directives I'm about to describe. And those are healthcare proxies, living wills if you choose to sign one, and powers of attorney. So I often say everyone over the age of 18 needs these documents. But the more over 18 we are, the more we need them. And then once we have any kind of diagnosis or helping support a loved one with a diagnosis, really important you get those advanced directives out of the file cabinet, dust off the dust, hope that they are there, and bring them to a special needs attorney, elder law attorney, to review and make sure that they are sufficient. Very often they are not. They are either missing, and so a person went to an estate planning lawyer for a will and they got a will, and they got no advanced directives from that lawyer because they don't live and breathe the world that we live. Or they're just really basic. And when someone has complex medical issues requiring caregiver support, you need the best advanced directives. Like, you need the Cadillac of advanced directives, like kitchen sink, anything that you want a loved one to be able to do for you. You want to let them have that authority in that advanced directive. So that's my sort of what are the legal issues you should be thinking about. Get out that legal file, establish a relationship with a trusted, trained lawyer.
And I just wanted to clarify, there's a difference between, in law world, right? Between doing elder law and trusts and estates. And I think a lot of folks don't realize that trusts and estates is the disposition of your assets after you're gone. Elder law, well, why don't you explain? Right?
No, that's such an amazing thing to want to clarify, Laura, because as lawyers, we all have our areas that we feel comfortable in. And within this particular domain, we all fall under the umbrella of trust and estates practice, right? But there are trust and estates attorneys who know tax law and are super comfortable with the Internal Revenue Code and estates with $200 million. And that's all they're really thinking about and training about. They're not really active in a guardianship court case to know proactively, how do I need to protect my clients if they need to qualify for government services? So elder law, I think of as an additional training component to being a trust and estates lawyer. I often say in my practice, we certainly work with the 200 million plus estates. People come to us for advice. We know the tax law. We can help them. But the majority of people, 99.9% of the country, don't present like that. And we really want to be able to work with that cross section and support them. So definitely it's a different kind of training because it requires you to understand, especially the laws relating to to qualifying for really expensive medical care. Because again, once you're in that caregiver role, you're going to pretty quickly bump up against our healthcare public policy deficiencies and what's covered and what's not covered, and how a program designed for seniors known as Medicare specifically carves out long-term care. So, there's a really important overlay to Medicaid. So I'd say that's the biggest difference between a classically trained trust and estates lawyer is they haven't gone on to learn the Medicaid rules and the guardianship court rules. And I think, in my view, our advanced directives as elder law and special needs lawyers are very well crafted because we know the extra powers to put into those documents in light of those program requirements.
So people need to be informed consumers when they reach out to lawyers who, oh, trust and estate, and to sort of ask the question, do you work in elder law? And if so, how? And, to really probe, and not just sort of make the assumption that if you're listed in the directory under trust and estates, you can handle what's happening in this moment for the caregiver. Is that a good summary?
Yes, very.
So my next question is, are there differences in the way the law plays out or operation, sort of the experience of caregivers like Michael's describing, that, depend on the age or the demographic of the person being cared for, as well as the relationship of the caregiver to that person? So Michael became a caregiver for a friend. I became a caregiver for a family friend. No legal relationship, right? My friend was a family friend who was much older. That was one set of scenarios, but now I see this can happen at any stage in life, so what should people be aware of? Like, how does that play out? And I'm sure there are lots of scenarios, but can you give us some tips?
Yeah. So when we're doing these documents with clients, the documents are pretty static because we've invested so much work product in them. When we're working with an individual family, we know what they need in their documents. It's all a matter of who are they going to give the authority to. And we spend a fair amount of time brainstorming the who, because it's a tremendous amount of responsibility. We want to make sure that the person they're naming is generally good with follow through, the kind of, high executive functioning skills, and is trustworthy. A trustworthy person with good judgment doesn't have to be a doctor to be a caregiver. They just have to know like how to find the right doctor. They don't have to be an investment advisor. They know how to, they need good judgment about how to make sure that your money is protected if you're not able to keep an eye on it yourself, and not put their hand in the till, right? Like that's everyone's worst fear. And I would say what I have to overcome is giving people this authority well before there's any danger of anyone needing it. That's the advanced part. Like none of us can time our own incapacity or death. And it's probably a blessing of life, right? That we're not burdened with that knowledge. So we can't time it. So we need to prepare for it. And we always say in our practice, planners win. So the people who plan ahead of time have measured conversations. They absolutely have a easier transition in that moment where there may be a sudden onset of an illness, because then the person opens up the legal folder and everything's up to date, everything's fully documented and robust in terms of how complete the documents are. Often whenever I lecture, I tell people, tonight, like everyone's in your home anyway, like open up your own legal folder. Open up, if you're a caregiver, the legal folder that you have for the loved one that you are providing, coordination and oversight for. How long are those documents? Like more really is more. Like when it comes to a power of attorney, you don't want it to be 2 pages. You don't. You probably want it to be 11 pages long. So that's the kind of thing that we're brainstorming a lot, the who, making sure that they are trustworthy. And then also with respect to age, I mean, life can be really long, right? So I have some clients in their 80s and 90s doing advanced directives with me, and they want to name a sibling. Like, that's great. But like, can we also have a backup in the next generation and maybe the generation after that too? So I'm looking for some generational protection provided by the agents in that scenario. And
And
then I'm also looking for any conflicts of interest. So business partners, for example, would not be great choices for these kinds of agents because it'll just be too tempting. People who've in the past borrowed a lot of money for you and never repaid you, like that makes me a little uncomfortable too. So like I'm looking for the historic relationship.
what if it's a child who borrowed money? Yes.
Again, like really varies. Sometimes it's entirely appropriate. It's a hard situation. Divorce can be financially devastating. Grandchildren need homes. There's lots of extenuating circumstances to borrowing money. Um, but then there are the cases that start to worry me and maybe smack a little bit of some financial abuse. So we do a lot of listening. I would say we do a lot of listening in our estate planning engagements for what's going on beneath the surface here.
You talked about the idea of doing this in advance, right? And advanced directives, I think Michael described. Let's go over it again, right? It's a healthcare proxy, it's a living will. What else?
Power of attorney.
Power of attorney, right? So those are the three biggies, right, to get done. I have encountered in my family this, and maybe it's an Italian thing, but the superstition that if I write my will, now I'm going to die. And I don't know if that happens in other cultures too, but it was sort of a long time to persuade a family member to please not leave a mess by not doing
Yeah.
any of this, the will and anything else. It was sort of everything, the advanced directives, the will, whatever. Are there any tools or tips for overcoming that kind of fear?
Yeah. It's real. The fear is real. And honestly, like I've probably supervised the signing now of, I don't know, 4,000 wills in my practice. I've been practicing 30 years, 20 in this area specifically. My own body temperature goes up when I'm witnessing a will. Still, like the room gets hotter. Like there's just a physical reaction we all have. It's a definite moment. But I too share some of your Italian heritage, Laura, and I will say that when I have someone who may be in her, 80s or 90s and she's of Italian descent, I have to have the tissue box handy. There's some, hyperventilating going on as the will is being signed. So I think that our Italian culture is in particular vulnerable to it. There are others, sometimes days of the week. Like I learned it was a horrible situation with, there was one culture where you just didn't sign anything on the 13th of the day. And like above and beyond our Friday the 13th kind of cultural stuff here, but like
Right.
really 13 is taboo. And they were like beside themselves that they found themselves in my office on the 13th signing legal
Yeah.
documents.
Yeah.
But I will also point out to like the 5,000 wills in my will file that people are still living. And so,
You go. So
I can show people my
statistical,
cabinet
right.
downstairs where all of our wills are stored. So, again, yeah.
Thank you. That's so helpful. And I
The
hope that that's
yeah.
encouraging to folks who are in the room. So back to you, Michael. What are some, you mentioned being asked over and over again, right? For this information. But and you also mentioned not really, just for details, right? But what are some other common challenges that caregivers can face in dealing with the healthcare establishment, nursing homes, police officers, banking institutions, any of these sort of institutional structures that might be more inclined to put up barriers to helping you do your job as a caregiver? And maybe you've learned some tips along the way of sort of how you kind of broke through.
But there's this interesting thing that happens between healthcare proxy and power of attorney, because when you're caring for someone who's in a nursing facility, you are their healthcare proxy, and you have certain rights and responsibilities relating to their medical care, you know, and you've asked questions, you've had conversations with your loved one about what kind of care they need. But then getting them into a home or getting them, you know, transferred to a different facility is actually a legal matter, and paying for that is a legal matter. And so that's one of the things you have to remember, is that you are, in my case, I was functioning as both. It's not always the case. And you could argue that it might be better if the medical stuff is separated from the financial and legal stuff. But, you know, that's just something to be aware of, that dealing with the medical stuff is one set of responsibilities. Paying for those is another set of responsibilities. But I guess the biggest surprise I had to do with banking. And I just thought, well, I have my friend's banking information. He's given me permission. Hold on, my battery power is about to run down. Hold on a second.
I can chime in where I think Michael's going for a second, which
Sure.
is, so he thought it was going to be pro forma. Michael, do you want to keep going?
Yeah, I exactly. I thought I have signed power of attorney, and I can help my friend pay his rent, and I'm going to set up a new phone account for him. I'm just going to do it because I have his passwords and do it. And then I found out that that's not the case. The bank did not recognize my power of the form that I had that said I was his power of attorney. They wanted to see him in person at the bank. I was very lucky because Richard was able to actually come out of the home occasionally. I could take him out. I could, you know, arrange for an ambulance to take us to the bank, but that's not always going to be the case with people. So it's very important to establish that relationship with the bank before you need it. And I think Maura can probably tell us more how that happens.
Yeah, they have to accept the New York State statutory power of attorney that's duly executed. But one thing to consider is, especially when you're dealing with a branch, you're walking into a branch with your power of attorney in hand, I have a couple practical tips. You're going to walk in with the original. Don't even try to walk in with a copy. You're going to bring that original with you. They're going to make their own copy of it, and you are going to insist they copy your original, and you're going to walk out with the original power of attorney. But you could, like, they need to copy it themselves and have it reviewed by their legal, and it's not going to be instantaneous. So, and I hear some echoing. Hopefully that disappears.
I hear some echoing.
Michael, I'm going to let you take over for a little.
I muted Michael. Let's just see. Let's just see.
Okay. Oh, good. So what Michael said about going ahead of time to the financial institutions while the person who's given you authority still has the ability to go with you or verbally confirm over the phone is absolutely right. You always need the power of attorney because you need that kind of omnibus umbrella authority. It allows you to sign tax returns and do other things that are not at all financial account specific. But then the financial institutions, and I love them all. I have this love-hate relationship with them, right? You know, we all need them to hold and secure our money. But because they are holding and securing our money, they are very cautious. And that's a good thing until it's not. So if you're able to go to them ahead of time, ask for their institution-specific forms and have your loved one sign that form in addition to the master omnibus New York State statutory power of attorney form, great. Okay, but many times you don't have that particular luxury. That's a lot of work to do. Financial institutions come and go. So if it hasn't happened, you bring your original, you have them copy it, and then you ask for their specific form. And very weirdly, you get to complete that power of attorney to yourself with your omnibus authority in the power of attorney that you've been given. And it feels so weird to be signing as the principal using this other document and the agent, like it's its own like circle of hell, all of this paperwork. It really is, on top of doing the caregiving that Michael so poignantly described. In it's there used to be a judge in New York who would say in this regard that no good deed goes unpunished. And when you're trying to get a power of attorney honored, that definitely feels true.
I'm going to try to unmute Michael. I just wanted to go over, Michael, can you unmute yourself? See if we can get
Yeah.
you. In your situation, though, your friend did not have a power of attorney, right? So when the incident happened, when he fell in the shower and everything, so you had to go back and have him do the power of attorney while
Yeah.
you were caregiving, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And this goes back to one of the main reasons I created this book, is because I think many of us find ourselves in a non-ideal situation. So what Maura described is like the planners always win. My book is for people who are not planners, but not necessarily like the person who's lying there in the hospital bed, but their friends who are doing all the work and taking care of them. Like, I didn't ask to be in this position. I didn't, sign up in the morning and say, hey, I want to be someone's healthcare proxy and power of attorney. I just stepped up at the moment when I was needed. And so my friend had not planned, not prepared. And so to answer your question, there was a patient advocate at the Harlem Hospital where my friend Dick was, and she'd had a lot of conversations with him. He had moments where he was kind of conscious and unconscious, but she realized he had no paperwork signed. And when I came in to visit, she made a point of coming around and chatting with me privately and asking about paperwork, and asked if we would be willing to sign, because I was there with his other friend, Lila. So yeah, we were really lucky that she happened to be there, because he did have moments where he was not really aware of what was going on, not able to speak, not able to really move. So she caught us at that magical moment, critical moment.
Yeah.
And then later, when he improved, we were able to take him out to the bank. We took him to the Social Security office. We got a lot of stuff done when he was able to move. But this is only because we were very lucky. He had not planned for all of these things, and we were in the right place. One other sort of tip: if you've ever applied to get financial aid for any of these services, you run into a whole other world of pain. So in my friend's case, we were applying for some aid to get into a specific nursing home, and they wanted 5 years of banking history. And so right before his accident, he had just changed banks, and I had to go to his old bank to get them to release 5 years worth of records, and they didn't want to have anything to do with me. That even with the power of attorney form, because those were his sealed records and his deceased partner. And it was really only through my persistence and through I called somebody, and I eventually got an upper manager to just take on the case and he said, out of just human interest, I'm going to give you permission to have these records.
Right.
And I don't know why it was such a big deal to the bank, because he no longer had money there. The account was long closed. There was nothing I could do with this information. It was just that the nursing home wanted to see that information.
Yeah. And so I think that is a takeaway that I take from that. But as Maura was talking about, there are these circumstances in the planning process of sort of, the child who's borrowed money. Well, there are extenuating circumstances, sort of thinking through who is the designated caregiver on the health and on the legal. Then we have this situation where you end up sort of stepping up and doing it, and it's a good deed. So thinking about qualities and attributes of caregivers, it seems to me, and I have seen in my own experience, that the person who is like, I need help, like you're at the hospital, you go to the desk and you say, is there a patient advocate or a social worker? I don't know what to do. I will do what it takes. Help me. Goes to the bank and says, I need help, and doesn't let themselves get kind of brushed off. It seems to me that that is like the number one attribute, is that persistence, that willingness, the style, the tone, the like, hey, can you help me? Maura's nodding. I'm just wondering if, there are other
Yeah.
things like that. And I've seen that in my own experience. I've seen that with friends. I've seen a good family where one was very nervous about the getting on the phone asking. Well, the other does that all the time, but her sister was good at other pieces so they kind of figured out in their dad's, years, that sort of who could do what, and we're honest about, like, I don't want to make the call, but I'll do it. But I'll go, run around to here and there. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this play out in other circumstances more, but I think, it is a very real part of this, is as you're living your own life and you're doing this, and you kind of step up means also ask for help as many
Yeah.
times as you need. Is, that's a takeaway that I'm taking.
You can't be afraid to use the sympathy card either.
The
The
what?
sympathy card will get you far. You can go to people and just say, listen, I need your help. I'm helping this person who's,
Yes.
in a hospital.
Yes. More, any thoughts on that?
I have so many thoughts. It's like, I know we wanted to open this up to questions. The one
Yes.
thing I'd be remiss to just not mention and really highlight is what happens when advance directives aren't done. And unlike, Michael's dear friend, the person doesn't have the ability to sign documents
Yeah.
and has lost capacity, is still living, still needs caregiving and support, but there's no legal authority for anyone to help. And this comes as a surprise for spouses to hear, but being married gives you no legal authority to do this. It gives you statutory rights to be named as the guardian over anyone else, but it doesn't spare you a guardianship proceeding and needing court authority to help a spouse, especially when it comes to anything of a financial nature. So, the alternative relief in that moment is known as New York State Guardianship Court. Other jurisdictions refer to it as conservatorship. And so if you hear about Britney Spears conservatorship, that's the language California uses, Connecticut uses, New York calls it guardianship. They are synonyms mostly. So you have to apply to the court on an emergent basis in New York. In even a black and white case of someone in a coma, no ability to communicate, that is at a minimum probably $10,000 to $30,000 of legal work from start to finish. It's like having an estate for someone while they are alive. But it's worse because you have to prove them to be incapacitated. So on death, you have an estate and it costs $10 for a death certificate to prove someone deceased. When they're alive, you have to have a trial. Every guardianship case has a trial. There's a lawyer appointed to represent the incapacitated person. There's a lawyer for the family member. There's sometimes, if there's a dispute, a court evaluator as a neutral. And then, because our legal process is so protective of making sure a guardian is not inappropriately appointed. And that's good. Like, we wouldn't want someone down in White Plains getting appointed our guardian as some kind of identity theft on steroids. But it's bad when you need to help someone and you have a really complicated legal proceeding on top of really complicated medical issues and you're just tapped out. The opposite of planners win, our other phrase is, even when our clients win in guardianship court, they feel like they've lost. That said, guardianship court is an amazing venue when someone's abusing the power. You can go to guardianship court and get the power of attorney removed. Like, there's all kinds of amazing things that happen in guardianship court. I'm not blaming guardianship court. It's just, if you can avoid it, and most people can by signing really good advance directives, you really want to prioritize it.
So helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to just share a couple of things that are in the chat in the time we have left. And I'm also going to just drop a link to the Westchester County Department of Senior Programs and Services caregiving page, which is a host of resources for folks to be aware of. But let me just read. Janine Ferrari it has shared that her dad lives in the New York State Veterans Home in Montrose, and where she co-founded the Family Council. And she works with the LTCCC, the Long-Term Community Care Coalition, Janine, I believe, as a family council liaison. She helps families form, build, and maintain family councils in long-term care residences throughout the United States. There she is. I'm gonna have a, do you want to say something? Then someone else has a specific question I want to make, but Janine, tell us about your
It's, you know, it's funny. It wasn't funny, but I'm working. My work is running parallel with what you do. I'm dealing with what Maura was saying is really I'm feeling it because I've seen. I haven't experienced it myself, but I have in my own family council and working with people throughout the country. They're dealing with the same kind of issue where they're being frozen out, like perhaps the dynamic in the family was the father chose the brothers to watch after him, and then he got sick, and they rallied and they lobbied for him to the father to dictate that the brother would be taking care or dealing with all the money, in the father's case when he's in the nursing home like my dad's nursing home, and then they freeze out the other siblings inexplicably. And then the siblings they can't visit. They have nothing. They have no rights. And then they have to go to a lawyer like Moira and apply for, fight for just the right to visit or call or be notified that something happened to their father. It's a really sad thing that I see over and over again.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's hard. Those are the hardest of all the guardianship cases. And, if you think about it, it becomes, divorce among siblings, and divorce between partners is sad enough, right? But then you think, okay, well, there aren't going to be many Thanksgiving dinners after this guardianship court proceeding. Really, really hard stuff. I want to turn next to the
Thank you.
question.
You
Yeah,
have a question. Okay, I just wanted
yeah.
to, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to turn to the question about what happens if someone gets sick not in their home state, which is the gist of what the question seems to present. Um, Documents signed in one jurisdiction uh, are supposed to be honored and binding in another sister state within the United States. It's a legal concept called comity. So as long as it's just a temporary trip, and and whatnot, the healthcare agent authority, the power of attorney authority, all of that should still be absolutely great to work with, even on a temporary relocation scenario. If it's a more permanent relocation, you do want to go to the next jurisdiction, find the local council there you're going to work with, and have your advance directives reviewed. Look at the planning that was done in New York State, if it was New York State to start, and now then let's say it turns into Florida. Well, Florida state Medicaid program is very different than New York State's Medicaid program. Because of that, there might be certain things that need to be in the power of attorney that a New York lawyer wouldn't think to add. So having a local trust and estates elder law attorney in the home jurisdiction and the new home jurisdiction becomes really important. Okay.
Aaron Gannis has said, I am a care navigator with the new Care Connections program as part of Westchester Department of Senior Programs and Services. We are here to specifically help caregivers navigate this complicated journey and connect them with appropriate professionals, legal, financial, home health, and their own mental health. We aren't the experts, but we help connect to the experts in a variety of fields. Thank you. I just want to read that out because we are recording this. We want folks to know about this resource. And the link has been put in the chat, and we'll get that up on the website. I also want to share the Long-Term Care Community Coalition, which Janine mentioned, and is a grantee of the Community Foundations, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving quality of care, quality of life, and dignity for elderly and disabled people in nursing homes, assisted living, and other residential settings. That is also a resource. I'm going to pop that in the chat. Ask about power of attorney be easily revoked. Take a look at that more. See if
Yeah. So I'm going to read it out loud to Laura's
Please do.
point for the recording. So it says, also, can a power of attorney be easily revoked? My sister was so against me being my mom's POA, but my mom appointed me to be her POA. My sister claimed that POA was revoked. So powers of attorney can be revoked. A couple formalities need to be followed. The revocation needs to be in writing, and the agent who was named in the original power of attorney needs to be informed of the revocation. And let's say you're concerned that even once notified, an agent wouldn't honor the revocation, a formerly named agent. You can go that extra step of actually recording the power of attorney with the county and thereafter recording the revocation. And that gives constructive notice to financial institutions, and they're liable if they honor the power of attorney's authority after that revocation. Again, just another reason why banks, if I could defend them a tiny bit, get so nervous in this area. With respect to sisters, this is and siblings, this is a common fact pattern. It can feel very threatening to another sibling, the authority granted to one. There's typically really good reasons for it. So I'm sorry that you're going through this. It sounds like some proactive legal counseling would be really important here, because someone who's going to that lengths typically will go to other lengths, and it's a warning sign not to be ignored. And we all have war stories as colleagues and practitioners and caregivers and friends of caregiver. We all know the bad stories out there, and waiting has never helped. Yeah, hard. It's a hard enough job when everyone gets along. Like, I'm one of 8 kids. So when my parents were at the end of their respective journeys, my sister's a dentist and my brother was almost a priest. And then here I am like a lawyer. It was like a beginning of a bad joke almost. But we were able, with the 3 of us in different roles, to really support each other and to take turns and shoulder the burden. And so I would just say, since this is about caregivers and essentially supporting caregivers, like, whatever team you can build around yourself, do it, because the statistics on caregivers and how their health can be compromised above and beyond the person that they're providing support to are really real, and self-care needs to be a big part of it.
And I want to just add, because there's some great pointers being put in the chat from Janine about the Long-Term Care Community Coalition as another support network for caregivers, and a very good point to sign up for their newsletters. And so we put that information in the chat. I think the more, it's just as Michael's saying, to have things organized and to have information is helpful. It's empowering in what I think can feel like a very random situation where you're getting curveballs thrown at you. So this is very, very great. And the phone number, 914, I'll just say it, 813-6262 for Care Connections. Michael, any thoughts in our last couple of minutes in terms of your ongoing experience and as an angel caregiver?
Just really, it's important to remember how long these things can go on. Like, I'm blessed that, my friend is still with us and doing really well. He can no longer walk, but he's very alert. He watches the news. He's as happy and alert as he can be given his circumstances. And so over time, your relationship changes and you start to forget some of the things that are your responsibility. And so it's important to keep, arrangements with the bank have to be refreshed. They want to make sure that, your power of attorney is, has not gone stale or out of date, as Maura mentioned. So I'm sort of sitting here very comfortable and relaxed that I have everything taken care of for my friend. And then I realized, like, he lost his phone. These things happen, his phone was lost in his room, and getting it replaced has turned out to just be, 2 weeks of pain. So it's important to just remember to keep up with things. It's not just like a one and done kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I have found that being a caregiver, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of responsibility. It is a lot of stress and toll on your health. It also at times, for me, has enriched my life. And I don't know that I can really say more than that, but I wondered, Michael or more, if that is, it keeps you in the moment. It keeps me grateful. It has kept me grateful for good things. And, you know, it does feel good to help, even as you're kind of pulling your hair out. And I just wondered if that had been your experience as well, because it sounds like you are doing an awful lot for your friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just puts everything in perspective, you know, like we went through COVID together. We, you know, like I was downsized. I lost my job at one point, but seeing him and seeing how small his life is, and the fact that he's relatively happy and healthy, where, you know, and safe where he is, you know, so it really has put my life in perspective. And when I see him, we reminisce and we talk about the good old days, and we talk about who won the U.S. Open and complain about the players, and it just gives you a pause in your life. So yeah, it is incredibly rewarding, and you know, I feel very lucky.
Well, thank you. And thank you for writing these books. It really,
Writing, but
yeah, coming up with the concept and executing on, you know, making the books and more. Any final thoughts, takeaways on your part? And thank you for doing this program and sharing this information. It's hard to find this information, so I'm so grateful to you. Any thoughts you want to share?
No, I guess I think again, the legal issues can just change so rapidly that to just try to stay up ahead of it, to Michael's point, and then to use it as a lesson. Like if you are serving that caregiver role for someone else, think about who would be doing it for you, and try to make it as easy as possible for that person to come in and support you, because it's always so easy to take care of someone else. It's sometimes harder to take care of yourself. So just keep coming back to that for the caregivers here.
Excellent advice. Thank you both for this wonderful presentation. Does anybody else want to share anything or ask? We're at the end of the program, but I'm happy to just see if folks want to ask any other questions. Janine, thank you so much for, and Karen for putting all this information in the chat. Anything else? Then thank you for joining us. This concludes the program. I'll stop the recording, and I wish everybody a good evening and a healthy evening. Thank you, Sandy. Good to see you.
Thank you, Laura, for putting this together.
Good night.
Thank you very much, Laura and Michael, for your books.
Night.
Okay. Bye now.
Yeah.